Okay, I need to tell someone about this, and you're it. I was scrolling a Korean forum at like 2 in the morning, don't ask me why, and I found a thread that has stopped me cold. So I translated it, the whole thing. Sit with me. My daughter pressed her seal onto 41 documents she was never once allowed to read. By the time I understood what those seals meant, her husband's father had already decided which of them would be thrown away. It was her. I was the retired bank clerk, the sadon who paid for nothing at every dinner and who mattered to no one. That was the mistake that ended him. But to understand the night I set one thin folder on that table, I have to take you back 14 months, to the last time I believed she was happy. My name is Jong-su. I am 62 years old. For 35 years I sat behind a desk at a bank and read what people signed. I buried my wife, Jong-su, 3 years ago. After that, my daughter Soo-yeon was the only light I had left. Every Sunday she came. I made her barley tea in her mother's celadon cup, the same cup since she was a girl. She married Kang Min-jun 5 years ago. A quiet man. Worked at his father's development company. I thought, a steady man. Good. I was happy that my daughter was happy, so I stayed quiet about the rest. That was always my way. I believed a marriage was a house you were not meant to look inside. That keeping the peace meant not asking. In Korea we have a word, nunchi, the art of reading a room. I always read mine the same way, don't ask. The father-in-law was Kang Dae-ho. At our first family meeting, the Sangyeonri, he shook my hand a second too long. He wore a watch worth more than my car. He paid the bill before I could reach for my wallet. He always did. And each time he paid, he looked at me a half-second longer than he needed to. I knew that look. I had given it to loan applicants. It was the look of a man pricing everything in the room. The chairs, the people. Me. Just a bank man, he said once, smiling. I smiled back. Chamyeon, saving face. I told myself it was politeness. It was not politeness. It was a verdict. At a dinner that first winter, everything looked warm. Min-jun poured for his father with both hands. Soo-yeon laughed. Abeonim, you raised her well, Dae-ho told me, lifting his glass. The smile arrived a half-second late. I thanked him. Soo-yeon reached under the table and squeezed my hand. In that moment, I had everything I thought I needed. Jun-ho was 3 then. He fell asleep on my shoulder in the taxi home, and I did not move for an hour. That was the last winter I remember being simple. I thought my life had finally gone quiet. I was wrong. The changes came so slowly that each one had an easy explanation. That is how the worst things arrive. Slowly. With reasons. The first sign came the following spring. Soo-yeon called on a Sunday to say she couldn't come. Her mother-in-law wanted a family meal. That's fine, I said. And it was fine. Once. Then it was every Sunday. When I called her, she answered fast, low, in a hurry. Twice I heard a voice behind her. Soo-yeon, come here. And she would hang up. Mid-sentence. Mine or hers, it didn't matter. She's a new wife, I told myself. A Munuri has duties. The mother-in-law comes first. This is normal. The celadon cup sat clean and dry in the cupboard for 6 weeks. It wasn't normal. But I didn't know that yet. That summer, she started asking strange questions. Small ones. Folded into ordinary talk. The way you hide a pill in rice. Appa, do you still have your ingam seal? The registered one? I said, of course. Every Korean adult keeps one. For those who don't know, the ingam dojang is a seal you register with the state. Where you press it, the law treats it as your own hand. And the apartment, she asked too lightly. Is it ours or Jont's? I said it was mine. Paid off. She said, good, that's good. I thought she was worrying about her old father's security. I was touched. I made her tea. That was the first question I should have questioned. I didn't. In autumn, Jun-ho came to stay a week. He was 5 now, and he had gone quiet in a way that made me watch him. Not tired quiet, the quiet of a child carrying something he doesn't have the words to set down. One evening I brought him ice cream, and he didn't reach for it. He looked up at me and said something I still hear. "Harabeoji, when we move to the new place far away, are you coming too?" "Appa says Iyama isn't coming." I froze. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Nothing," he said, and started eating the ice cream and changed the subject like a man who'd said too much. 6 years old. I called Soo-yeon that night. She laughed. Warm, smooth, exactly her mother's voice when she wanted a conversation to end. "He's fine, Appa. Kids say things. Don't worry so much." I knew that tone. I let it convince me anyway. The next month, there was another family dinner. Near the end, Min-jun set a small stack of papers beside his wife's plate. "Just company documents," he said. "Sign here and here." Soo-yeon signed without reading, pressed her seal, kept smiling at me. I had read those forms for 35 years. Even upside down from across a table, I knew what one of them was. A yonde boju, a joint surety. In Korea, if you sign it, another person's entire debt becomes legally yours. All of it. Families pressure each other into signing them all the time. It's called trust. It is how ordinary people are quietly buried. I opened my mouth. Then I closed it. Chaemyeon. Not at the table. Not in front of the sadon. I looked away. My mistake, the one I carry. Weeks passed and I couldn't reach her. Min-jun said she was resting in Jeju with his mother. A little breakdown, he said. Nothing serious. Then Jun-ho on the phone, small and flat. "Iyama's not in Jeju, Harabeoji. Iyama's home." She just cries in the room. That was the first lie I caught with my own hands. Something in me went clear and cold. Not panic, the opposite of panic. Clear, like the river in January. For 35 years, when something didn't add up on paper, I had one habit. I pulled the record. So the next morning, I pulled the record. There is a document in Korea called the Dunggibu, the property register. Anyone can request it. It cannot lie. I had read 10,000 of them. I called an old colleague, Beck, still at the branch. I asked him to check 2 things quietly. He heard something in my voice and didn't ask why. The printouts came the next day. I laid them on the kitchen table, next to the celadon cup, and I sat down before I read them. I put on my glasses. I took them off. I cleaned them on my shirt, though they were already clean. Then I read. The first thing I saw was her name, Han Soo-yeon, under one word, guarantor. Then the number. It had more zeros than a person like her would ever hold in her hands. Hundreds of millions of one. My own hands went cold first. The cold started in the fingertips and moved up. A high, thin tone arrived behind my eyes, and the kitchen dropped a degree. The light on the paper became very detailed. I could see the grain of the fibers, the tiny broken edge of one letter. Kang Dae-ho's company. A development firm. A sihaengsa. It was drowning. A failed project. Loans stacked on loans. The whole thing underwater. And against that debt, 3 names had been written as guarantors. His was not one of them. His son's was not one of them. His son's wife. My daughter. She was the name that would drown when the water came in. I read it a second time. I told myself there was an explanation, that she knew, that it was fine, that I had misread it. I had not misread it. In 35 years, I never once misread this. There was more. Beck had found a lien, a gunjodang, freshly placed. And a note. A family court consultation, booked in Min-jun's name. Divorce, quietly prepared. Custody, with the family's money and the family's lawyers, going to the side that wasn't buried in debt. I sat there, and I understood the whole shape of it at once, the way you understand a wave only when it is already above you. They would let the company fall. She would take the debt. He would take the child. And they would keep their name clean. The new place far away. Jun-ho had told me the ending months ago. I had given him ice cream and told myself it was nothing. I did not cry. My throat closed around something that was not grief and was not anger. It was older than both. I did not call the son-in-law. I did not call his father. I called my daughter, and I said 4 words. Come for tea. Alone. She came on a Tuesday. She was thinner. Her ring turned loose on her finger. Her nail polish was chipped down to nothing. I made the barley tea. I set her mother's cup in front of her. She looked at it, and her face did a thing I will not forget. I did not show her the papers yet. I said gently, "Tell me about the documents you've been signing." She went still. Too still. "They're just company papers, Appa. Min-jun handles it. I don't really understand that side." "Soo-yeon," I said, "I read papers for a living for longer than you've been alive. Tell me." And the stillness broke. Not loudly. She just put the cup down, and her hands started to shake. "I don't even remember most of them," she whispered. "They'd bring them at dinner. Everyone watching. A bionim waiting. They said it was normal. That family helps family. That a good myeonuri doesn't make her husband lose face over paperwork." So I signed. I pressed my seal where they pointed. Because refusing, in front of all of them, I couldn't. You know I couldn't. I knew. God help me, I knew exactly. It was the same silence I had kept at that same table. She had learned it from me. "How much do you think you signed for?" I asked. She said a number. A small, wrong, hopeful number. I turned the printout around on the table and slid it toward her. I watched her read her own name. I watched her find the zeros. She stopped breathing for a second. Then she said very quietly, that can't be mine." "It's yours," I said. "By law, all of it is yours. That is what the seal you kept pressing means." She looked at the cup, at the tea, at the kitchen she grew up in. "They're going to take Jun-ho," she said, not a question. "They've booked the lawyer," I said. "They mean to let the company fall on you and walk away holding your son." She didn't scream. She didn't cry the way people cry in dramas. She just got smaller, the way a coal gets smaller, down to the burning part. And then she asked the question I had been waiting 62 years to be asked. "Appa, what do I do?" I picked up my glasses. I cleaned them properly this time. And for the first time in a long time, the cold in me turned into something with a shape. They had all looked at me and seen a used-up bank man. The quiet sadon. The one who paid for nothing and mattered to no one. They had written their whole plan on paper, and they had forgotten who spent 35 years learning to read exactly this. "Nothing yet," I told her. "You do nothing. Leave the paper to me." I did not go to the father first. A wall doesn't argue with the man who built it. I went to the son. I asked Min-jun to meet me. Just us. He chose a bright coffee shop near his office, the kind with too much light and no corners to hide in. He came in smiling. The smile still arrived a half-second late. He ordered for both of us without asking, his father's habit worn on a younger face. "Abeonim," he said warmly. "Is this about Soo-yeon? She's been under a lot of stress. We're taking care of it." "Taking care of it," I repeated. I let the words sit between us. He didn't like the way I said them. I did not shout. I told him, quietly, 3 things I had read. Her name. The number. the court date booked in his. The smile went first, then the color. For one honest second, I saw the boy under the man, and the boy was afraid. "You don't understand my father," he said low. "Nobody says no to him. I couldn't. You think I had a choice?" There it was, the oldest excuse in the world, dressed in a good coat. I had used a version of it myself, at his father's table. "You had one choice," I said, "between your wife and yourself, and you've already made it." He looked away, toward the window, at someone who wasn't there. Then something in him hardened back into his father's son. "It's her signature," he said, "her seal. Legally, it's her problem. Be careful, Abiyanim. You're an old man with a folder. They have lawyers." "They do," I agreed, and I stood up. "Thank you for the coffee I didn't order." I left him there in all that light with no corner to hide in, and I understood the last thing I needed to understand. There was no man to appeal to. Not the son, not the father. Only a machine that ate people and kept its hands clean. That night, Suyeon called me, and her voice had a new sound in it. Flat, sanded down. A lawyer's letter had come. Cold paper, cold words. She was to vacate the house. A custody hearing was set for the 14th. They were moving faster now. The company would file within the month. When it fell, it would fall on her, exactly as planned. "Appa," she said, "maybe I should just sign whatever they want. If I fight, they'll take Junho and I'll have nothing. Maybe if I'm quiet—" "No." "You learned quiet from me," I said. "It's the one thing I taught you that I regret. We are done being quiet." But when I hung up, I sat in the dark a long time. She wasn't wrong. An old man and a folder against money and lawyers and time. I looked at the Celadon cup in the dish rack. My wife bought 2 of them 30 years ago. One had broken. This was the one that lasted. I didn't feel like the one that lasted. I felt like the one that broke. And for a few days, I did nothing at all. There is a kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. I moved through those days like a man underwater, doing small useless things with great care. I reheated the same barley tea 3 times one morning and drank none of it. I went to a pojangmacha near the river one night, alone, and sat under the orange tarp with the rain coming down at the edges. I ordered soju I didn't want and odeng broth I didn't touch, and I watched the steam and the wet neon and the water running in the gutter. 62 years old, a widower, a retired clerk. What did I think I was going to do? Read a rich man to death? An ajuma refilled my broth without being asked and said nothing. The kindest thing anyone had done for me in weeks. I thought about Jong-su, my wife. She had a way of looking at me when I was hiding from something hard. In the hospital ward, she held my hand and said, "You always wait too long. Then you're the strongest man in the room. Stop waiting so long." I had waited. My whole life I had waited. I had waited at Daeho's table while he priced my daughter and found her useful. The rain eased, the neon steadied, and somewhere under all that tiredness, the cold, clear thing turned back over. Because here was the truth I'd been too tired to hold. They had power. But I had the paper. They had lawyers to argue what the paper meant. But there was one reading of it no lawyer of theirs wanted anyone to see. A man does not load his own drowning company's debt onto his son's wife by accident. He does it to save himself. In 35 years at that bank, I learned where men hide things. And I learned the name for what they're doing when they hide it. Moving money out the back door before the creditors come through the front. There's a plain word for it: crime. If Daeho had shifted assets out of the failing company to keep them from his creditors, and I would bet my life he had, His own maneuver was a crime with his name on it. Her signature made her look guilty. His transfers made him actually guilty. And guilt, unlike shame, leaves a paper trail. I stood up under the orange tarp. I left money on the plastic table. The Ajuma nodded like she'd known all along I'd get up eventually. I walked home along the river in the thinning rain, and for the first time in days, my steps had a destination. I did not need to beat their lawyers. I only needed to hand the right pages to the people who already wanted Dae-ho ruined, his creditors, and the office that prosecutes men who hide money from them. I would not sue him. I would simply introduce them. The next morning, I called Beck and asked him to meet me. Not at the branch, at my kitchen table. He came, this man I'd worked beside 20 years, and he looked at the folder already forming there and said, "Jong-su, what have you found?" I showed him. He was quiet a long time. Then he said what I needed to hear from someone who knew the paper as well as I did. "This is real. This will hold." For a week, my kitchen became what it had been my whole working life. A desk, a place where documents told the truth if you stacked them right. The property register, the lien, the guarantor form with her fresh seal beside a debt older than the marriage, and the transfers, the ones Bayek helped me trace, money slipping out of the dying company into places a creditor couldn't reach. Out the back door, just as I'd known. I made copies. I organized them the way I used to for the loan committee, so a stranger could open the folder and understand everything in 5 minutes. I found a lawyer, not an expensive one, an honest one, a woman who did this work for people buried by families like the Kangs. She read it twice the way I had. She looked up and said, "Your daughter's signature can be challenged as fraud, and the father is exposed on the transfers. Who assembled this?" "A bank man," I said. She almost smiled. She told me what to do, and it was smaller and quieter than revenge. Give the transfer evidence to the creditor's team. File a report with the prosecutor. Let the machine turn on the man who built it. I told Soo-yeon the plan. All of it. She listened with Jun-ho asleep against her, and when I finished, she didn't cry. "There's a family dinner on the 12th, she said. 2 days before the hearing. A bayonim called it, to make me sign the last papers in front of everyone, so I couldn't refuse. The same trap they'd used all along. The table, the witnesses, the face I couldn't lose in front of the sadon. I thought about that, and then I said, "Good, we'll go." She stared at me. "Appa, we'll go," I said, "and I'll bring the folder. Let them set the table one more time." For 2 nights, I barely slept. I read the pages until I could recite them, not from fear, so that when it mattered, I would not need to look down. I filed the report the lawyer prepared. I made sure the creditor's people received their copy the morning of the 12th, quietly, on schedule. By the time we sat down to that dinner, the machine had already begun to turn. They just didn't know it yet. The last thing I did before we left was wash the celadon cup and set it in the cupboard. It felt like closing a door I intended to open again. Then I put on my good jacket, took my old leather folder under my arm, and we went to have dinner with the family. The dinner was at Dae-ho's house. Everything in it was expensive and nothing in it was warm. The long table, the good dishes, Min-jun avoiding my eyes, his mother arranging plates like a woman who'd done nothing wrong in her life. And Dae-ho at the head, magnanimous, sure. "Abayonim," he said, spreading his hands. "I'm glad you came. Family should handle family matters together, don't you think?" "I do," I said. "That's exactly what I think." And I set my folder on the table beside my plate. He glanced at it the way a man glances at a fly. "We have a few small papers for Soo-yeon to sign after we eat. Nothing to trouble yourself with." "Let's do the papers first," I said. Since we're all here, since there are witnesses. I saw the word land. He had taught it to me. Witnesses. I opened the folder. I did not raise my voice. I have never once needed to raise my voice to read. This is the guarantee your family had my daughter sign, I said, laying down the first page. For a debt of your company, a debt about to come due. Daeho's smile held. She signed it freely. That's the law, old man. Her name, her seal, her responsibility. It is her name on the paper, I said. I'll give you that. I laid down the second page, but it was your hand that moved it, and that I can prove. The smile flickered. First crack. These are transfers, I said, laying down page after page. Money leaving your company through the back door ahead of your creditors. You loaded the debt on her to save yourself. And to save yourself, you did this. That's, he started. His voice had changed. You don't know what you're looking at. I read documents like these for 35 years, I said. You called me just a bankman at this table. You were right. You just never asked what a bankman learns to see. The mother-in-law had stopped arranging plates. Min-jun was very still. And Daeho was doing the arithmetic at last, and the numbers were wrong for him. This morning, before we sat down, your creditor's team received a copy of these transfers. So did the prosecutor's office. I only came tonight to tell you in person. That is the manners you taught me. For a moment, the room was so quiet I could hear the expensive clock on his expensive wall. Then he tried to regain it. The voice, the sighs. You have no idea what I can do to you. To her. I will bury. You already tried to bury her, I said, under your debt. And while you were digging, you forgot to look at who was holding the shovel's paperwork. He looked at me then, really looked, the way you look at a door you thought was a wall. Too late. I closed the folder. I stood. I did not gloat. There is no smaller man than the one who gloats, and I'd spent long enough being made small. Soo-yeon, I said, get Jun-ho's coat. She rose. For the first time in 2 years, she rose without asking anyone's permission. At the door, my grandson slipped his hand into mine and asked if we were going home. Yes, I said, we're going home.
Behind us, in that expensive, unwarm house, a rich man sat at the head of a long table and listened to his own clock, and began, for the first time, to be afraid. It took months for the machine to finish turning. I read about most of it in the news, the way strangers did. The company collapsed, not onto my daughter, but onto the man who owned it. The transfers became an investigation. The investigation became the thing that follows a name for life. Soo-yeon's signature was challenged as fraud, and the honest lawyer was right. It did not hold against her. The debt went home to the man it always belonged to. The custody hearing came. A mother who had signed nothing willingly, whose father sat beside her with a folder, kept her son. Min-jun I saw once more at the courthouse. He looked like a man in a coat 2 sizes too big now that his father's shape was gone from behind him. He said nothing. Neither did I. Spring came. On a Sunday, Soo-yeon came for tea.
She brought Jun-ho, who ran through my small apartment like it belonged to him. Because it did. I took the celadon cup down from the cupboard, the one that lasted, and made barley tea and set it in front of my daughter, the way I had since she was a girl. She wrapped both hands around it. Her ring fit again. Her nails were painted, a little carelessly, the way of a woman with better things to do than sit still. Appa, she said, and she smiled, and there was nothing sanded down left in her voice. Thank you for not staying quiet. The tea was warm. Jun-ho was laughing in the other room. And the quiet in that kitchen, mine, hers, his, was not the quiet they tried to make us keep. It was ours. It was the sound of a family that no one owned but us. Yeah, that's the one I couldn't stop thinking about. An old man, a leather folder, and 35 years nobody bothered to ask him about. Tell me, what would you have done? I'll see you next week.